Okay, welcome back to this studio short featuring a tufted coquette hummingbird. Now, what's of interest to me today is this area here where there's traces, there's a little hint of another foot that comes over here and grabs this branch under here. So this is going to catch my attention. In my mix here, I have got a little bit more stand oil in the water mix. It's water and stand oil from Winsor and Newton. There's that delicious diode purple. If I bring in some of the burnt umber, I can try and make a black substitute. Which is actually nudging brown the more I put that in. So a little bit of extra diox purple. So let's zoom in on this little area that I'm interested in, this bit here. And we can see that it's just a fiddly little bit here. So it seems to me that this puff leg is over a little bit too far. It needs to go back a little bit. So the foot, such as it is, or the wrist part of it, comes in here. A different angle to that, and comes down here, makes a reappearance here, where a toe comes round and grasps on, and the little toe on the underside comes round to grip. So that was surprisingly easy. Now something else that I need to correct is this little area here. So I'm just going to rotate the brush and try and find a very fine point. And I can see that this needs to come down in this direction. And this should be a lot darker. And so by layering up this colour, I hope to nudge it in that direction. And round the tip, I'll bring off a little bit more, a little bit more rounded. And another feather there. So I'll have a last attempt at correcting the drawing when I get to, if you look at the background, it's a solid green, whereas I've got a mottled background. And I now think that I would be much better I'd be much better off having a flattened background. So that it doesn't distract from the bird getting the centre of attention. The toes are quite cluttered in there. It's quite a tangle. So I'll try and sort it out, or maybe even simplify it. And I'm putting in little markings for guides to show me where my next bits of information should probably go. So that's that. And now that I've done that, I think that dark is so dark that I could get away with detailing the beak a little bit more, or the feathers under the beak. Create a bit more information for the viewer to interpret. So again, I'm revisiting this, trying to put in those diagonal scallops that I mentioned before. Darken the underside of that. Eyeball. So as I mentioned before, I'm working in sort of broken, curved U shapes, like the handwriting practice that we used to have in primary school. And some more. I'm trying to protect the detailing that was already there. And that means that this area here, these blacks, could be more black. And similarly with the shadow under the bib. Okay, so how does that read? And similarly, the dark on the beak. Could be emphasized a little. There. And similarly, there's a need to redraw the dark of this wingtip. And some of the tail feathers. Now, the information is missing for me, so I feel I need to rely on some knowledge. I feel there would be a feather here. Sitting on top. And let's show where this body is. The tail feathers seem to fan out, scoop out a little bit before they return back upon themselves towards the body. And so I think that's a reasonable detail. And then there would be a central feather. And I'll just block in that information now so that if I do some research I can go back to it and see if there's some correcting to be done. And just bring that shadow into the body a little bit more. That way, to help us see it. And hopefully you can see it too. Some more of the mix. This is burnt umber, largely untouched by mixes. So if I do this, I can try and warm up the air underneath and bring it into the greenery that's there. That's a good level of contrast. Back into my black again, I want to redefine this line here. So those darks help the lights pop out through contrast. Okay, and we have a light mix there. Because what I'd like to do now is add some lighter feathers on top, just little hints of extra light. So let's move this back. There, out of the way, so you can see as we try and bring in these extra light touches. It seems to me now that this mix is ideal for putting these longer feathers on. It's just what was required. A few test strokes on the palette, and I'm now using greaseproof paper. So to me that's given the hairiness of those feathers a much more plausible look. Some test strokes on the it's just so that the whole business of cleaning up the palette afterwards becomes easier if you're just disposing of some waxed paper rather than trying to scrape back dried paint off a glass panel, which I favoured before, but now I just need to simplify all the things that I do. Just need to be a little bit more simple. For me, most things have to be a kind of time-saving exercise, energy-saving exercise. So back into this little area of loose feathering near the vent of the bird, and these long feathers that show where the puff leg is. So I'm hoping that's going to be my darkest darks and my lightest lights. The highlight for the eyeball. And I've just realised there's some areas where some darker strokes are needed to bring out the sparkle. I need to have some darks in there. And if I overdid it, can I revisit this area and go in with darks to soften the lights that I've just applied? Yes, I can. So I guess for someone who like me likes these tiny little details, I could go back and forward all day trying to correct this. Now I've seen something else that I'd like to improve. The little sparkle areas. So I'm going into this viridian green mixed with cadmium yellow light and a bit of titanium white, and I'm trying to get the same sort of syrupy mix. So I'm sticking to the fat upon lean rule, and I'm going to take a much finer brush. Let's see, pick up the paint from the end of one brush onto the tip of the other, and see if I can put in some tiny little marks of green. And it's giving a kind of speckled effect. And I feel that it comes down a little bit further than I had it before, into this area here. And some of that light colour would help. can help frame the colour, give it a little bit more shape, by showing that these also follow the kind of scalloped letter U handwriting practice detail I was mentioning. So in my book on birds, it says that this is a largely olive bird, but it has light band on its tail, which is this area here. Should have a little bit more white work on it than it currently has. So not too much. But the bird is supposed to have kind of white rump. Now as for the feet, maybe this bluey mix with a little bit of orange dried up should create a grey. Okay, let's pull in some of that dark mix to grey it down a little. So my black mix is nudging purple. So let's look at the feet, just some little details here and there to suggest the scaling. Just on the toes, and perhaps a little bit in the leg area. Perhaps more will be needed later on. Okay, so now I need to be fairly brave and make up a green mix, which will help throw the bird forward by pushing everything back. The reason we're still looking at the background, although it's out of focus, there is still some detail in it which distracts from the birds, distracts from the bird, and the joy of the painting, I suppose, is the detailing on the bird itself. So anything that takes away from that is problematic. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix up a nice fresh sap green, and I will probably use cerulean blue hue, and cadmium yellow light. There's the cerulean blue hue. I want to make up quite a lot of this mix so I don't run out, because I want to create a coating for the entire painting. Hopefully you can see that. Cerulean blue hue, yep, and cadmium yellow light. And a lot of my mix. There. The stand oil and water mix. I'm using a Daler Rowney brush for my mixing, so as not to sacrifice any of my preferred brushes. The cerulean blue hue in particular is quite stubborn. It doesn't want to mix in. So that's nice, but I can see that it's not dark enough for a match for the background, so I'm going to add in some more cerulean blue hue into my mix. Keep going. And again, it's quite stubborn because it's old. And so perhaps ideally I should get some new paint. Okay, so I've got enough paint that I think I'm going to last the entire painting. And the first piece that I want to do, what I'm doing is I'm trying to mix off the palette and keep it close. The first bit that I want to do is this delicate little bit in here. We're going to shape the body on one side, and it also identifies the wing on the other side. So I need to travel up here a little bit more to show that that wing, underside of the wing, is convex. So that's a detail that was lacking that I needed to put in. And also underneath the branch, I want to check that that's helping it to pop out. To stand out a little bit more. There's a correction that's needed for the wrist of the bird. It's left foot. And if I continue on this side, I help to identify the branch that it's on. And now, having done the perimeter work, I can fill in the gaps. Perhaps help round off that little piece there. Okay. Now again, the tiny little details. Now, if you saw my elastomorphs, I like painting in little gaps, filling in little spaces. There you go. Yes, if I had planned out this painting, which I didn't plan it out, it just happened. A little bit more spontaneous painting as an attempt at alla prima. So even with this session today, we're probably just over the 2-hour mark. But unfortunately, sometimes I can't concentrate for that long, and so I have to break it up into manageable chunks for my concentration levels. I've probably mentioned before, I have ME, and that does affect quite severely how much I can do in a day and also how much I can concentrate. But having said that, since I've started doing this work, my ability to concentrate for longer periods has improved. So there, framing the outside of the bird up to that bib. Now, if I remember correctly, it goes in and it comes out, changes direction ever so slightly. So that allows me to do that, and I can correct the neck to make it come in a little bit, because oil paint is beautiful and forgiving. Now, I probably won't do all of this on camera. I might end soon. But as you can see, simplifying the background means that the attention is drawn where it needs to be, on the bird, which is the star of this particular show. Again, since that neck has been compressed a little bit, I need to bring in the head and neck a little bit here to help it appear plausible. And having done so, I can now work away from the bird without worrying about having affected it too badly. Now, another negative space which has caught my attention is the area between this wing and the tip that I tried to round off. Rounding? And perhaps more likely, nope. Now I have to say at this point, the mix is lovely to work with. It's like a more gluey version of the ink, the inky mix that I like to get with my paints. So, rounded off the end there. Perhaps a little bit more paint to medium ratio. So I just went into a stronger mix of the paint. And again here, I get to correct the drawing. So the tail goes in and then scoops out a little bit, creating a little palm shape that I mentioned before. But more there, I think, would be useful. So, and again with the branch, I can demonstrate the branch is here by painting the negative shape behind it, and where it meets the wing on the underside. And then having outlined, I can work with a little bit more freeness, a little bit more abandon in this area. Once I've finished doing all the detailing, the perimeter of the bird, I'll do probably the rest of the background using a flat brush. So let's go around this tail here and pull away from the body. So apart from some work, some little tweaks that I'll do once the camera stops rolling, I think that's it for this bird. I've enjoyed doing this one. I can't wait to do another one. Having to recharge the brush quite a lot with paint. Just because I want the application to go on and not be disturbed too much. Now here's a little detail where I want it to come in around the shoulder and narrow out the neck a little bit. There, I'm putting it upside down now. Because in one of the earlier episodes I mentioned how the neck needed to be a lot more elongated, and by doing so, something like that would help create that illusion. So on the crest now, I'm just going to apply and drag away from the bird without too much working on it. So trying to use some fairly confident strokes. I'm now glad that I decided to change the background to one which is more like a copy of the photo reference. There we go. So a bit that I dread is getting the angle of the beak. I always admire the bird painters who paint these beautiful birds with lovely clean, precision shaped beaks. And so I'm going to have to attempt that now. I'll probably stop talking. Okay, so what I tried to do there right at the end was change the direction a little, because I want that beak to come to a very, very fine point. So I'm making a chisel on that side, and I'll make a chisel on the other side once I've painted the rest of the beak in. Okay, and then change direction, try and get that chisel edge there to a fine point. Okay, took a few goes, but got there in the end. So what I'm noticing is when painting this, I followed parallel to the beak to help it work. But with the tufts on the crown, what I'm trying to do is to give the sort of tiny amount of raggedness that's there, I'm working at an acute angle to it, so away from the bird, and that is parallel to the beak there. It's not something that I know because seldom do I paint birds in oils, and I've documented all my work with oil paints like this and uploaded them to YouTube. And so I'm going to leave that there because the rest is just more of the same. I hope you found something of interest to you, something that's useful for your artistic development, and I hope this helps to inspire creativity for you wherever you may be. Okay, thanks now, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.